So to apply our solder mask, we are back in the exposing area where I have the solder mask printed out here, and I also have a UV curable ink that I can apply on the PCB, and it will be cured by using UV light. So this step is a little messy, but it's always worth it to go through this step if you really want your PCBs to look nice, and especially a must if you are doing SMD soldering, because that will really help you minimize errors while soldering really tiny SMD components. Now for this, apart from the ink and of course gloves and a few paper towels, you would also need a cellophane paper for spreading the ink onto the PCB. I've tried using a whole lot of different plastics to do this, but most of the plastics that I've used, either they stuck to the paste and it was really difficult to take them off after the ink was cured, or it didn't give the ink a nice glossy finish. Gloves, a must. This is not gonna hurt you, it's gonna be so messy if you don't use it. It's just easier to use gloves at this point. If you get this ink on your fingers, on your hands, to use alcohol or warm water to wash it off. To put the ink on, put a little dab of ink in the center of the PCB, and that's it. That's all you would need. And I'm pretty sure this ink is gonna last me for a few years. Put 1 drop of isopropyl alcohol in there just to make the ink a little thin and easier to spread. I'm just using the back of the spoon to mix in the alcohol and spread it as well. Once I have the ink nicely mixed up with the alcohol, it will change its consistency a bit. It will be much easier to spread across. Once I do that, I put the cellophane that I have cut on top of it, and I use a paper to spread the ink all along the PCB. And just to make sure, you want to do this before you drill any holes in the PCB. Now just take your time doing this. It might take a while initially for you to do this, but once you get a hang of it, it'll be much easier. In this video, I'm using a cellophane paper which has some wrinkles on it. Please don't do this. It's really difficult to get a clean silk screen with a paper that has any defects on it. I should have really used a better paper. Once that is done, it'll look something like this, and this is the ideal consistency or the thickness of the ink that you want on your PCB. Once that is done, you have to be really careful in aligning the solder mask that you have printed on your transparencies onto the existing PCB. Any mistake here and your PCB is completely unusable, because once the ink cures, except for sanding it down, there is no other way to take it off. So be extremely careful in positioning the solder mask on the ink. Once you have the solder mask on there, expose it under your UV exposer for about 5 minutes. Now we are done exposing it for about 5 minutes. Now I gently take off the top glass and peel off the cellophane paper from the PCB. All goes well. As you can see here, all the places where we had the mask on, the ink has not cured, and that has stuck to the cellophane, and that's exactly what we want. Go ahead and take the PCB, clean it with isopropyl alcohol, wipe it down, and there we have it. Voila, a nice blue PCB. So the next step is, even though I have cured the ink for about 5 minutes, I want the rest of the ink to be cured really hard. At times what happens is you may not uniformly apply the ink, so Some places the ink would be thicker and some places it would be thinner. The places where the ink is thicker, it might take more than 5 minutes for it to cure. So I'll let it cure for about 5 minutes more under the UV lamp. That will make sure I have uniform exposure throughout the whole PCB. After exposing it for about 10 minutes, I have the ink cured, and now all I'm going to do is I'm just going to drill a few holes in the PCB. Usually what I would do is I would just, instead of just directly going ahead with the drill machine and drilling holes in, I will take a 0.8 mm drill bit and go around all the holes by drilling a few pilot holes. By doing that, or just marking those holes using those drill bits, by doing that, what I do is when I actually use a drilling machine to drill those, I don't get any runouts. I get the holes at the exact position I want them to. This is very critical in this scenario because with the solder mask on, you really don't have much of a leeway to mess up with your holes. So now I just use a handheld drill to drill all the holes in there. Depending on the number of holes that you have on your PCB, it can take anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes. Once all the holes are drilled, you would want to take a fine sandpaper. I use around 3000 grit sandpaper and just sand all the holes down so that they don't have any burrs. And the PCB feels really nice and smooth to the hand. There you have it. Our PCB is ready. That is it, folks. Until next time, have a good day.